So as we resume the teaching session, please once more give rise to bodhicitta and listen with bodhicitta. So now we come to look at the Bardo of Samadhi, or we could say the Bardo of Meditation. The root text reads, Karma, now when the Bardo of Samadhi is dawning upon me, I will abandon all forms of distraction and delusion, and rest in the infinite state that is free of distraction and grasping, gaining stability in the two stages, generation and perfection. So let's look at the first line. What does Karma mean? Well, again, in English we could say, alas. It's an expression of a sadness, of weariness. When we look at the experience of all sentient beings who, due to their delusion, their failure to understand the nature of things, wander and suffer endlessly and needlessly in samsara. When we look at the state of all sentient beings of the six types throughout samsara, we feel the sense of weariness or sadness, and so we have this expression, Karma, alas. Now when the Bardo of Samadhi is dawning upon me. What is meant by Samadhi? Or if we translate it into English, we could say meditation or concentration. What do we mean by that? Well, we mean a state of maintaining awareness in the space between two thoughts. So the previous thought has ceased, the next thought has not yet arisen. In between the ceasing of the past thought and the arising of the next thought, there is a moment of awareness. So resting in that awareness or sustaining that awareness is what we mean by samadhi. Of course, this word samadhi is also used to describe the many different types of meditation that are taught by and practiced by non-Buddhists. The various samadhis practiced by the non-Buddhists can lead to the states of the four formless realms, or the various levels of the form gods and so on. But this is not the type of samadhi we're talking about here. Here we're talking about the samadhi that is the union of shamatha and vipassana, the union of calm abiding and deep insight. So again, what we mean by samadhi here is the state of awareness that occurs after a thought has ceased and before the next thought has arisen, resting in or sustaining that awareness. Samadhi, in short, by samadhi, we are referring to the samadhi or the state that is the union of shamatha and vipassana. So these days, there is a very prevalent misconception about meditation or samadhi. People think, and not just worldly uneducated people, but even educated Buddhists, even lamas and monks and monastics and so on, they many of them think that when we say meditation, well, we're referring to just one type of meditation. Meditation is just this very general word that refers to just one thing. Basically, that meditation is just of one type. It means sitting still in the sevenfold posture of Vairochana and resting in stillness, something like that. That equals meditation. Meditation equals that. So a lot of people have this misconception, and again, it's not just worldly uneducated people, but even monastics, even those supposedly learned in the Dharma. Well, this is a grave misconception. When we speak of samadhi or meditation, we're speaking of so many different types of meditation. So this one word refers to a whole range of different types of meditation. Not all types of meditation are the same. There is the meditation of shamatha, the meditation of vipassana, the meditation of the unity of shamatha and vipassana. There are generation stage meditations, completion stage meditations, meditations that unite those two stages, and so on and so forth. They might all share the similar trait of being practiced while one is sitting in the sevenfold posture of Vairochana, but that does not mean that the meditation one's training in is the same. There are so many different types of meditation. The word samadhi or meditation can also refer to the meditations of the six unions, the various meditations of the Great Perfection, and so on. So, since this one word, samadhi or meditation, can hold a variety of meanings, well, what does it mean here in this context of the Bardo of Samadhi? Primarily, what type of samadhi are we talking about? Well, here we're talking mainly about the Great Perfection samadhi of resting at ease in Rigpa. Natural rest in Rigpa, which is natural awareness. In terms of, we speak from the perspective of the Nyingtik tradition, the heart essence tradition, then we can say that samadhi here refers to the meditation training in introducing directly the face of Rigpa in itself, deciding upon one thing and one thing only, and confidence directly in the liberation of rising thoughts. These being the three vital statements of these being the three vital statements. So samadhi in this context we can say refers to the great perfection meditation training in these three vital points. So now that this bardo of samadhi is dawning upon me, I'll abandon all forms of distraction and delusion. So we have so many forms of distraction and delusion, right? So abandoning all, casting aside all such distraction. So be free of past thoughts and not yet involved in future thoughts. In this way, free of distraction. There's so much to say about this in Longchenpa's, one of his 7 treasuries, the treasury of the Supreme Vehicle. Or rather, in one of Durutta Minima's instructions, he speaks of maintaining Rigpa free of the 3 times, free of the consciousness or mind of the 3 times, past, present, and future. So any material entity or any, we could say, conceptual object, by necessity, it either pertains to the past, the present, or the future, right, to one of the 3 times. Rigpa, though, natural awareness, is beyond the 3 times. It does not pertain to past, present, or future. It's not a material entity or a conceptual object in that way. So, to this end, then, Durutta Minima describes the natural state as being free of the 3 modes of consciousness, consciousness pertaining to past, present, and future. So, this being the case, then Rigpa is described as the natural state free of the 3 times, or literally like the 4th state that goes beyond the 3. So this is describing Rigpa and referring to the fact that Rigpa is beyond the 3 times, beyond concepts of the 3 times, and yet even though it's beyond past, present, and future, it is naturally endowed with luminosity or clarity. This is Rigpa, and this is explained in much more detail and very clearly in that and other scriptures. So in short, with the term bardo of samadhi here, what we're referring to is the state of Rigpa, natural awareness, in which thoughts of the past have ceased, thoughts of the future have not yet arisen, and one is free, completely free of any conceptualization of the present moment. This is Rigpa. And this is the samadhi that we're referring to here in the bardo of samadhi. Just as it said in the 4th chapter of the Prayer to Guru Rinpoche in 7 chapters, don't invite them, don't chase after them, don't let mind fabricate or contrive. Simply allowing them to settle in the face of their own arising is liberation into the Dhammakaya. To this Lama, Rigpa's self-liberation, we pray. So this is what we mean by samadhi in this context. So in short, sustaining Rigpa, sustaining the recognition of Rigpa, resting in Rigpa, that's what we mean by samadhi. That's what we mean by the bardo of samadhi. So resting in the state of Trekja and Togo, these 2 aspects of the great perfection. That's what we're talking about here. Thus, abandoning all forms of distraction and delusion, thus I will abandon all forms of distraction and delusion and rest in the infinite state that is free of distraction of grasping. What's meant by free of distraction and grasping? Well, it means to rest, whether it be in the state of Turgal, direct crossing, training in the 4 visions of Turgal, or whether we're resting in the state of simplicity, Rigpa, with the practice of Trekja. We do so free of all distraction, free of all grasping, free of involvement with any and all thoughts, free of perception, conception, and in this way we rest in the infinite state. More generally, we could speak of the samadhi or the meditation of the generation stage and that of the completion stage. So the generation stage of Mahayoga, the completion stage of Adi Yoga, and then, as we're discussing here, the inseparability or non-duality of generation and completion, the practice of the great perfection. So this is referred to in the next line, gaining stability in the 2 stages, generation and perfection, which are the practices of Maha Yoga and Anu Yoga. So all of this was about the Bardo of Samadhi. We won't say much more about this Bardo because we need to move on to the others, or we won't have enough time to cover everything. Our text continues, at this time of single-pointed meditation, having given up activity, I must not fall under the sway of afflictions and delusion. So when we speak about meditation, well, meditation is something that only arises in isolation from in isolation from physical and verbal busyness, and indeed mental busyness. In order to develop meditation, then we need to retreat from verbal and physical activity. So that's what's meant here by giving up activity, giving up involvements and other preoccupations. So sorry, to clarify, we need to give up activity in the sense of retreating from physical busyness and also mental busyness. Or we could say we need to cultivate physical solitude and also mental solitude, as taught in Shantideva's The Way of a Bodhisattva. When training in meditation, we must take ourselves off to a solitary place, so we must cultivate physical solitude and go off to practice in a mountain retreat or another isolated place. If we remain in a very busy location and busy physically doing this and that, if we remain busy with our preoccupations, our ordinary preoccupations, then of course we're not going to be able to develop samadhi, a one-pointed state of mind. The same goes with our mind. We need to cultivate mental solitude, which means we need to lay aside all of our worldly preoccupations, our business and our other work and endeavors, the things that we are pursuing for this life alone. In short, all our mundane activities and involvements we need to lay aside, and then adopt a mental solitude. With physical and mental solitude, then we can begin to develop meditation, develop samadhi. This is, on the other hand, if we remain immersed in and busy physically with our worldly occupations and busy mentally with concern for business, for the 8 worldly dharmas, gain, fame, and so on, well then we do not stand a chance of developing meditation. There is no opportunity there for us to develop meditation. These days in Taiwan, for instance, I hear a lot of you saying, oh, I just can't develop my meditation, I'm just not progressing. Well, of course, if you remain so involved in your worldly preoccupations, so busy physically and mentally, there's no chance for meditation to develop. Whether you are training in shamatha or whether you're training in the great perfection, it's the same. You need to rely on physical and mental solitude. With that solitude, then you can develop with such solitude, with the support of such solitude, then you can begin to cultivate and develop your meditation. And you Taiwanese are incredibly fortunate. You have a lot of merit. You are able to receive so many teachings, so many excellent, profound teachings. Like, for instance, these instructions on the 6 Bardos. These sorts of teachings would not be taught in this context so openly in places like Tibet. And indeed, so many of you here have been practicing the Dharma or receiving the Dharma for decades, 20 years, even 30 years. So many of you are the students of great masters of the past, the student of this Rinpoche and that great Rinpoche, students of Dongse Trinoba Rinpoche and so on. You've been studying and practicing. I don't know what you've been practicing, but you've been practicing for, say, 20 or more years. So actually, many of you actually have no need to really come here and receive yet more instructions on the 6 Bardos. But in any case, these sorts of profound teachings would not be taught openly and freely like this in Tibet, in a more traditional setting. They would not be shared openly like this. So in this sense, those of you here in Taiwan, are really very fortunate to have access to such teachings. So we are in the last line of the next verse. I'll just read through the whole verse first. Yama, now when the Bardo of Samadhi is dawning upon me, I will abandon all forms of distraction and delusion and rest in the infinite state that is free of distraction and grasping, gaining stability in the 2 stages, generation and perfection. At this time of single-pointed meditation, having given up activity, I must not fall under the sway of afflictions and delusion. So The live stream resumed with Rinpoche explaining this final line. Excuse me. We need to practice in solitude. Actually, before that, Rinpoche said, um, so these sorts of instructions, these profound instructions of the Great Perfection, presenting us with the essence of the instructions on the six bardos. These are not instructions actually to be just shared easily with the public, with people who have not done a lot of practice and so on beforehand. That's really not how these teachings should be treated. But nevertheless, I find myself treating them like that or sharing these teachings in public in a way that is not really proper. Certainly in the previous generation, up until very recently, these sorts of teachings would not be taught in public in this sort of context. But these days, all the students are, well, in different circumstances and not really free at the same time. So they're not really free or kind of willing to give themselves freedom. At the same time, they're really interested in the teachings and requesting them. And other teachers are loosening up. So then, one feels kind of compelled to loosen up oneself. Anyway, actually, when we practice, as it says in the previous line, a single pointed meditation, we should practice in solitude, in isolation, just as Yeshe Dzogye spoke of in her Mahaguru, in her supplication to the Mahaguru. So I must not fall under the sway of afflictions and delusion. The afflictions refer to the disturbing emotions of attachment, aversion, jealousy, pride, stinginess, and so on and so forth. Someone who has very strong afflictions, who is very emotional, they are not a genuine, they're not a good practitioner. Someone who has very weak afflictions, very few afflictions, they are a good practitioner. Khenpo Daza Rinpoche used to say, someone with strong afflictions, well, that's a sign that they're not a good practitioner yet. Someone with very few afflictions, that's a sign that they're a good practitioner. A good practitioner, Khenpo Daza Rinpoche would say, should be happy no matter what situation they're in. Happy meaning they should be content, just okay. Like they should be easy and okay, at ease and okay with whatever happens, whether things go well for them, whether things don't go well for them. They should be stable and content, and that is a sure sign of a good practitioner. On the other hand, if we are not okay and content and stable, but we fall under the sway of the afflictions, attachment, aversion, and so on, and delusion, well, then this will cause us enormous suffering in this life. It is not at all pleasant to be under the control of anger, hatred, desire, and so on. And the karma that and habits that we accumulate as a result will cause us further suffering in our future lives. If we habituate ourselves to anger, then as a result we'll be reborn in the hell realms. Stinginess will lead us to being reborn in the hungry ghost realms, ignorance to rebirth as an animal, and so on and so forth. So falling under this way of afflictions and delusion causes us suffering and destruction in this life and also in our future lives. So we must be sure to not fall under the sway of these afflictions and delusion. Emma, now when the bardo of dying is dawning upon me, I will abandon all grasping, yearning, and attachment, and so on. So, we've just finished the two verses covering the bardo of dreams and then the bardo of meditation, and now we move on to the bardo of dying. So the bardo of meditation and the bardo of dreams are both periods of practice, right? We need to practice in the bardo of meditation. We also need to practice during the bardo of dream. In short, we need to practice at all times, when awake and when asleep, at all times. So now moving on to the next bardo, the bardo of dying. Kema is an expression of remorse. So we could say, alas, now when the bardo of dying is dawning upon me, now when this is manifesting for me. What do we mean by the bardo of dying here? Well, the bardo of dying refers to, the bardo of dying begins when we are struck by a terminal illness that is guaranteed to lead to our death. So an illness, it might be cancer or something else, which simply cannot be cured. No amount of operations, medicine, prayers, pujas is going to cure this illness. This illness is only going to result in one thing, and that is our death. So it might be that we are struck by such an illness, say 5 or 6 hours before our death, or it might be that we're struck by such an illness a day or several days or a month, several months, or even a year before our death. But the point is that this illness is a terminal illness. and it is guaranteed to be the cause of our death. So this is when it's at this point that the bardo of dying begins, when we are struck by a terminal illness, an incurable, properly incurable terminal illness. So uh, once we're struck by such an illness, the bardo of dying begins. The bardo of life has now finished, and the bardo of dharmata has not yet arisen. So the bardo of dying occurs between the bardo of life and the bardo of dharmata. When we are approaching the time of death, when we're really quite close to the time of death, then three signs occur. Three signs that we are approaching death occur. These are the outer, inner, and secret dissolution stages. Outer, inner, and secret dissolution stages. And if we are a good practitioner, if we've developed our practice well, we'll be able to recognize these stages and recognize that, okay, I really am. Yeah, I'm really approaching death now. There are many other signs as well, actually, in addition to these three signs that can be seen in one's dreams, one's physical body, and so on. These are explained in detail in Longchenpa's Treasury of the Supreme Vehicle. But to be honest, I don't actually remember all of those details, and also we're tight on time, so we won't go into other details. In short, there are three signs that death is approaching, and the first of which are the outer dissolution stages. So these refer to the dissolution, or we could say the disintegration of the sense faculties, the the faculties of eye, ear, nose, tongue, and textural, the body. And as we just said, the bardo of dying begins when we are struck by a terminal illness. Yes, that is the case. But we could say the kind of real, the bardo of dying begins even kind of more so. Like the real main body of the bardo of dying begins when these dissolution stages begin. So, as I said, we begin with the outer dissolution stages, right, which refer to the disintegration of the sense faculties. So, first of all, the eyes. The dying person's eyes might still see, but they won't be able to see clearly. For instance, their spouse or children might be at their bedside. They'll be able to see that, okay, someone is near them. They'll see a kind of vague form, but they won't be able to see clearly at all. They won't be able to recognize exactly who is there, what is there. Likewise with hearing. Someone might be at their bedside chanting some prayers or just talking. They'll be aware that, okay, someone is talking, there is sound occurring, but they won't be able to actually recognize words or recognize what is being said. Likewise with smell, whether it be a fragrant or unpleasant smell, they might register a smell, but it'll be a very vague kind of sensation, and they won't really be able to register whether it's pleasant or not. And the same goes with taste. Even if they eat something, they won't be able to experience, whether it's actually delicious or not, or what it tastes like. And the same goes with touch. So, say the dying person is wearing clothes, well, they won't really have a clear sense at all of whether they're hot or cold or what those clothes feel like on them. So these are all the outer dissolution stages, and these are very coarse. This is a coarse level of dissolution, the most coarse of the three stages of dissolution. Sometimes when you might have seen a dying person, or someone who's quite close to death, and they might actually speak about this, how they can see, but they really can't see it all clearly, how they can't hear clearly, they can't taste things really. Well, these are all signs that death is very close. So we've discussed the outer stages of dissolution. The outer stages of dissolution are the dissolution of our sense faculties, right? Now we move on to the inner stages of dissolution, which are the dissolution of the elements of our body. So first, these stages begin with our with the earth element that is the flesh of our body dissolving into the earth element proper. So when a dying person experiences this first in a dissolution stage, they will feel like they're falling into a hole, or they're falling down, and the dying person might say, "Please lift me up, lift my pillow up, make my pillow higher. I'm falling, I'm slipping." I've seen this a lot myself because being a lama, then I'm often called to the bedside of dying people to do poa and so on. So this really happens at this first stage of inner dissolution when the body's the earth element of uh, the body's flesh dissolves into the earth element, then the dying person will feel like they're falling. After that, then the all of the water in the body dissolves into the water element, and at that point, a lot of snot and spit and so on will come out of the body. So this is a sign that the water in the body is dissolving into the water element. After that, then the heat in the body will dissolve into the fire element. At this point, then the dying person might break out in a sweat. They might feel very hot, and then their hands and feet and the edges of their body will become cold as the heat in their body gathers towards the center. So this is a sign that the body's fire element, the body's heat is dissolving into the fire element. And then we have the breath, right? So the dying person will be able to exhale, but they'll find it more and more difficult to inhale. So this is a sign that the breath in the body is dissolving into the wind element. We could say that, or you might in modern terms say they don't have enough oxygen because they can exhale, but they're just not able to inhale. And this will go on and on until their breath becomes very kind of hoarse and racked, and they're no longer able to inhale at all. And with that, the inner dissolution stages are complete. That covers the inner dissolution stages. So the way I just explained it is one way of explaining it. Alternatively, there are some teachings where it's explained that first of all, the body's earth element dissolves into the water element, water into fire, fire into wind, and wind then into space, which is a little different, but in essence the same. Just a different style of explanation of the inner dissolution phases. At this time, so when during the dissolution, during these inner dissolution phases, the dying person is likely to feel intense fear and anxiety. Of course, they're dying, right? So they will suffer terribly from fear and anxiety. And depending on what karma they have accumulated in this life, what they've done with this life, then they'll have different experiences. So if the dying person is someone who hunted a lot, killed many animals, for example, in their life, then at this point, kind of during the outer and inner dissolution stages, they might have the experience of actually deer, their victims, right? The animals that they killed, deer and the like, actually coming to their bedside and stabbing them or butting them, trampling on them, even bearing swords and spears and stabbing them. Or birds, if they killed a lot of birds swooping down and eating out their eyes. Of course, this is just a deluded experience, but they will have this vivid experience as if these animals are really attacking them. If someone has thieved and robbed a lot, then they will have a corresponding experience. They might experience, people coming to their bedside or being around them and taking their property and so on. Their mind will be disturbed and distorted in this way. These are all the manifestations of karma, right? Deluded karmic perception. But the dying person will have this vivid experience as if it's really happening right then. Others, if they've practiced well, they'll have very different experiences. They might experience seeing their guru or guru rinpoche or other deities and gurus and actually meeting them in person. Meeting them really in person, like face to face, being able to talk to them. So that is also possible, but since most of us actually spend our lives accumulating negative karma, and we're very habituated to negativity, then most likely most people will experience fear, intense fear and anxiety, and these sorts of terrifying experiences during these dissolution stages. And many of you, I'm sure, have actually seen this, when you've been at the bedside of your family and friends as they're dying. And indeed, For instance, back in Marine film, there's a man, a local man, better not to mention his name, but when he was dying, well, he'd hunted a lot and killed many animals. And when it came time for him to die, he experienced something just like I explained. He was calling out to his children and the people around him, saying, "Get these deer off me! These animals are attacking me!" So he said that birds were swooping down on him and pecking out his eyes. So he had this vivid experience while dying as a result of the karma he'd accumulated. But like I said, on the other hand, there are those who have very different positive experiences. Like there's a wonderful story about a practitioner who practiced Amitabha, prayed to Buddha Amitabha throughout his life. He was not at all educated. He hardly knew anything about the Buddha Amitabha himself or the practice, but he had faith and he prayed to Buddha Amitabha and he recited Amitabha's mantra, Om Amideva Shri, Om Amideva Shri, and so on, uh, very diligently. And to finish that story, there was this very simple but sincere practitioner of Amitabha. He knew so little about Buddha Amitabha. He didn't even know what color Buddha Amitabha was. One day his son asked him, "Dad, what color is Buddha Amitabha? You know, this Buddha you're always praying to." He said, "I'm not so sure. Maybe blue, maybe green, I think." Anyway, later on, he kept on practicing, and sooner or later he died. And when he was on his deathbed, as he was going through these stages of dissolution, then, like I just said, some practitioners will have very, visions of the guru and deity and so on around this time. And so, as a result of his sincere practice, he had a direct, vivid vision of Buddha Amitabha, and he called out to his son from his deathbed. He called out, "Son, son, I see it now. Buddha Amitabha is red. He's red." Anyway, so this is all about the outer and inner stages of dissolution. This might sound kind of abstract or I don't know, but do understand that what we're talking about here is just the dissolution of the constituents of our own body and mind, right? We're talking about the dissolution of the faculties and so on that make up our own body. So once the outer and inner dissolution phases are complete, then the secret or innermost dissolution stages begin. So, what is our body made of? How is our body produced? Well, it's produced from the coming together of the white and red essence, which come from the father and mother respectively, combined with our consciousness. When these three combine, then our body of flesh and blood starts to develop, right? And in this body, we have a central channel called the Avaduti, and in the middle of this central channel abides primordial wisdom, or we could say the wisdom wind. There are actually many chakras in the body and many channels, subtle channels in the body, but we won't go into all of that detail now. The main thing to understand is that we have a central channel called the Avaduti that runs through the center of our body. The channel is slightly kind of pointed or closed at the bottom, sort of below our navel, and it opens up like almost like a skylight at the crown of our head. In the center of this central channel abides self-existing awareness, Rigpa, or we could say Buddha nature. So according to the sutra approach, we would describe this as Buddha nature, Sugata Garbha. According to the Great Perfection approach, we would use the term self-existing wisdom. At the top, in our crown is a syllable hung, which is, well, essentially this is the white essence attained from our father, but it takes the form of a syllable hung, which is upside down and bright white. And one finger width beneath our navel is a half letter A, half of the Tibetan letter A, pointing up. And this syllable is the red essence we attain from our mother. And as I said, in between these two in the central channel is self-existing awareness or Buddha nature. And this awareness or Buddha nature is naturally present within us, right? It is always present. It's always there, but it is not at present manifest. Its presence is not evident. Why? Because it's cocooned by the poisons, by the afflictions of attachment, aversion, and so on and so on, and by our habitual tendencies and obscurations accumulated since beginning this time up until now. So even though it is present there, it is not evident. As I said previously, it's possible that through the force of training on the path, in generation stage, completion stage, the great perfection, and so on, we can purify all of our obscurations and make manifest this ever-present Buddha nature or Rigpa, and attain liberation so that we don't have to go through the bardo of dying. Or we don't even have to go through the bardo of life. The bardo of life and all other bardos are brought to an end. But if we're not able to achieve that, well, we will, at the end of the bardo of life, we will approach the bardo of dying. And what will happen to us in the bardo of dying? Well, the self-existing wisdom that is present in our central channel, in the Avaduti, like I said, it's present there, but currently veiled by the two obscurations, the afflictive and cognitive obscurations. It's also veiled actually by our corporeal body. Our body of flesh and blood is also acts as a veil. It obscures and maybe we could say weighs down the self-existing wisdom. And like I said, this corporeal body of ours is the product of the white essence we attained from our father and the red essence we attained from our mother. And these actually function as veils or obscurations. Just one note about the bardos of meditation and dream. These bardos of meditation and dream are not actually experienced by ordinary people, right? For ordinary people, they have no meditation practice and they're completely unaware of their dreams, of the sleeping state. So we can say that ordinary people don't really have these bardos, but a practitioner experiences these two bardos, right? Anyway, back to the bardo of dying. When the secret dissolution stages occur, what happens is we go through three phases of appearance, increase, and attainment, or we could say appearance, increase, attainment, and complete attainment, these four. These are explained in the Tantras of the Great Perfection. So what happens is that as the secret stages of dissolution occur, the hung syllable that we have in the crown of our head, that is the white essence attained from the Father. This is the nature of aggression, this white essence, this syllable hung. And as the secret dissolution stages occur, first of all, this syllable hung, it descends. And as it descends, we have the experience of this blazing white light, like the light of 1,000 moons. Think of how bright and overwhelming that would be. Coursing through space down from the crown of our head to the soles of our feet. It's such an overwhelming experience that most people will respond with fear and terror, and they'll completely kind of blank out, such that all 33 aspects of aggression, we could go through these one by one. They are listed and explained in detail in the scriptures, but we won't do that here. In short, all aspects of aggression, all concepts of aggression cease, they halt, and as a result, then the dying person experiences intense clarity, an experience of intense clarity in which they have unimpeded sight, knowledge, awareness. They feel like they're endowed with clairvoyance. They can know everything unimpededly. What happens after this is that the half syllable that is red and below one's navel, this being the red essence attained from one's mother, and this red essence is the nature of attachment. This then flies upwards like a shooting star, courses up from one's navel to the crown of one's head, and it's bright red and as bright and intensely radiant as 1,000 suns. When this flies up to our crown, then all 40 aspects of attachment, or 40 thoughts of attachment, halt, and as a result, then the dying person experiences great bliss, an experience of bliss, real pleasure, a completely thought-free state. And after this, then so the white syllable hung has descended, the red syllable has ascended, and these two then meet in the heart. And what happens then is it's a bit like a fuse going out. There's just like you could say a kind of a pop and an instant darkness, right? Everything just goes completely dark. There's no thought, nothing. So when this happens, then the 7 aspects of ignorance come to a halt. and then one arrives, or we could say one returns to the basic original luminosity. Or we could say basic original luminosity arises or becomes evident now that all of these 80 aspects of the three poisons have been brought to a halt. And also a final note. So these 3 phases of appearance, increase, and attainment, and the 80 conceptual thoughts, or the 18 aspects of the 3 emotions, however we want to put it. These are explained very clearly and in detail in Mipa Rinpoche's commentary on the Guyagaba Tantra, Luminous Essence, and also in his commentary on the Kala Chakra Tantra. Just a quick note on the translation. I'll correct myself, or we said that the syllable hung descends all the way down to the soles of the feet and all the way up to the crown. Better we should say the syllable hung descends towards the soles of the feet, towards the crown, and then they meet in the heart center, right? That's just a clarification. So one thing to backtrack to the inner dissolution stages, I just realized that I forgot the space element when explaining those. So, I explained up to the dissolution of our breath into the wind element, right? But we also have the space element in our body. All the orifices and empty spaces in our body are the element of space. So finally, the final inner dissolution stage is those aspects of the space element in our body dissolving into the space element proper. And as I said before, there are different ways, slightly different ways of explaining the inner dissolution stages, but essentially they all boil down to the same main points. So now back to the secret dissolution stages. What we've now explained, the secret dissolution stages, in short, this physical body of ours, which has developed from the coming together of the white and red essences we attained from our father and mother, combined with our consciousness and the karmic wind that arises as a result. This is actually an obscuration, right? Like I said, it obscures self-existing wisdom. When going through the secret dissolution stages, the white and red element descend and ascend respectively. They meet at the heart, and through this process, through these dissolution stages, all concepts, all 80 aspects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance come to a halt. And as a result, natural awareness, Rigpa, is laid bare so incredibly clearly and vividly. Because, like I said, this physical body is an obscuration. When the white and red essences meet at the heart center and all afflictions cease, well, that is the end of the physical body. The physical body is now collapsed. So the physical body that was veiling awareness has now collapsed. It has subsided, and as a result, the natural awareness Rigpa is laid bare. Fresh, naked awareness becomes manifest so incredibly clearly. So this is an opportunity for a practitioner. If a practitioner has recognized the nature of mind already and trained in that, then at this point they will recognize Rigpa when it manifests in this way. If someone is not practiced and not trained and recognized, well, then they won't recognize what's happening here. The same thing will happen for all people, right? Because all people have Buddha nature. Forget about people, humans. Every single sentient being, all the way down to insects and so on, are endowed with Buddha nature equally. So Buddha nature does manifest. It manifests all the time, but we sentient beings fail to recognize it, right? That doesn't mean, though, that it's not there. It's a bit like if you're speeding through an area, or if you're flying in a really fast plane. Well, you're not going to be able to see clearly the area that you're flying through, right? You might be able to see the distant areas quite clearly, but if you look directly down, you're not going to be able to see anything more than a blur, right? So for most people, that's the experience that they'll have when Rigpa manifests so clearly, when it's laid bare and naked in this way. They won't register what's happening. It'll, just occur for a few seconds, and then another experience will unfold. But for the practitioner who has some familiarity and who has recognized the nature of mind, who has recognized Rigpa already and trained and practiced in their lifetime through Trekje and Turgal and so on. Well, then at this point, when these secret stages of dissolution come to an end, when the syllable hung, the syllable ah, that are the white and red essences, descend and ascend, meet at the heart, and all aspects of the afflictions, all conceptual thought come to a halt, then Rigpa will manifest so incredibly vividly and clearly that they will be able to recognize it for what it is. Okay, I'm going to tell a story now. I think this is appropriate here. This is a story about Mapa Lotsawa, the great master. He had a student called Mapa Golok, and Mapa Golok once asked his teacher, he said, Mapa Lotsawa, Guru, there's this talk of this type of power, transference of consciousness into another body. But you don't hear about people practicing that these days. Is such a thing really possible? Mapa Lotsawa said, yes, such a thing is indeed possible. There is indeed a way to do that. And the student Mapa Golok said, well, Guru, can you show us how? Mapa looked around, he scanned the horizon, and he saw that a calf had died earlier that day. It had died just a few hours before, and he said to his student, okay, I'll demonstrate it to you. And so he said, there's that dead calf over there. Now you focus on that dead calf. Mapa then entered meditation, deep meditation, and slowly he started to his body seemed to almost fall asleep or lose consciousness. And at the same time, the dead calf suddenly sprung back to life. It leapt off from the ground, started to running around, ran over to its mother, started drinking milk and so on. It was leaping here, there, and everywhere. But the students were amazed. At the same time, they were horrified because they looked over at their guru and his body was not breathing. And they thought, my God, our guru has died. What's happened? Slowly, though, their guru's body, Mahalotsava's body, started to revive and kind of came back to life, so to speak. He started to breathe again. And as that happened, then the calf once more collapsed and fell dead. Once Mapa had returned to his body, for quite a while he sat there, kind of really dull and seeming very heavy. The student said, what's going on, Guru? What's happened? And he said, my God, the body of an animal is a terrible body to be in. They have such dense karmic obscurations. He said, human consciousness is quite bright and quite aware, but animal consciousness is just so heavy and dull. My goodness, he said. So he said it was like entering a deep darkness, just being cocooned in darkness, being in that calf's body. So this just goes to show, this demonstrates the point that this body of flesh and blood is a veil. It's an obscuration. And when at the time of death we become free of this veil of the physical body, when we are no longer burdened by the physical body, then Rigpa, natural awareness, can manifest. It's no longer held back or veiled by anything, and it can, for just a few seconds, it can manifest so incredibly clearly. It can lay itself bare. And as I said, if one is a practitioner, then one can recognize this. This Rigpa manifests clearly like this, just for a few seconds, but it's still an opportunity for a practitioner to recognize. And if they do recognize at this point, then they will attain liberation, and they won't have to move on to the Bardo of Dharmata. They'll be liberated right there and then. Another way to attain liberation at this point is the transference of consciousness. So just after the dissolution stages have finished, when the outer and inner breath has ceased, that is the best time. That is the correct time to perform transference of consciousness. The ideal time. The dying person's teacher or qualified lama could do that, or one can, and one can visualize transferring one's consciousness into the heart of one's guru, mingling inseparably with their enlightened mind. Or you can transfer your consciousness, say, to the Iram deity, to their enlightened mind, or to Buddha Amitabha, and so on and so forth. There are so many different styles and types of transference of consciousness, like Dhammakaya, Sambhavakaya, Namanakaya transference of consciousness, the transference of consciousness that involves the three different notions, and so on and so forth. We won't go into all of those details. The point is that transference of consciousness is another way to attain liberation, liberation at death. And the main point that we're talking about here is that a good practitioner who is familiar with the nature of mind will be able to recognize Rigpa when it's laid bare at this point. And as a result, they will not have to then wander through the next Bardo, the Bardo of Dhammata, or the Bardo of Becoming, and so on. In his Treasury of the Precious Vehicle, the all-knowing Longchenpa says that if in this life you can recognize Rigpa 3 times during your sleep or during your dreams, then that guarantees that you will be able to recognize and thereby liberate yourself during the bardo, meaning at the point of death, and you won't fall into confusion, further confusion. So, there might be practitioners, those of us who have recognized many more than 3 times. We've recognized Rigpa many more than 3 times in our dreams or in sleep. But still, I doubt, like if someone like me, if I'm really guaranteed to be liberated in the bardo at death, because even though I might have recognized Rigpa many times in my sleep, well, look at how attached I am to appearances in waking life. How much I reify how much I reify the things that appear around me, like this cup on my table, the things before me, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I do wonder. I think it's still questionable. I think if we have not really established ourselves in very stable, consistent practice. But nevertheless, the all-knowing Lord Timpa says this in one of his treasuries. And the reason he says this, well, I mean, what is sort of the justification for him saying this? It's that compared to the clarity of mind in waking life, mind is 7 times more clear in dreams, and compared to dreams, or awareness is even seven times clearer in the bardo. So that means that our awareness in the bardo at the time of death, is 49 times more clear, more vivid than our awareness at present in waking life. So the chance then of recognizing is increased, right? Because of the increased strength of awareness at that point. Anyway, the main point is that we need to practice. We need to practice in training in the nature of mind and familiarizing ourselves with that. But we also need to practice in whatever other ways we can. Praying to the deity practice and visualization, accumulating virtue in various ways. Yeah, we need to apply ourselves to practice as best we can. And we should know that there is really an enormous difference between a practitioner and a non-practitioner. You cannot compare the two. If we meditate well in this life, we make use of our time and opportunity to meditate, meaning to remember, right? So we might not have direct recognition of the nature of mind at present, but if we just remind ourselves of the teachings we've received, we remind ourselves. Well, reminding is essentially meditation, right? To remember and to familiarize ourselves. That's what meditation means. So if we apply ourselves to that, remembering these instructions, for instance, as much as we can, then we'll become more and more familiar and in this life, and that will pay out in the bardo of dying. That will help us realize in the bardo of dying, because when the bardo of dying unfolds, we'll recognize, okay, this is what's happening. I'm aware of what's happening right now. Okay, this is Rigpa. I recognize this. I know what this is. I know what's happening. And through recognition, we will attain liberation. So that's what's meant by Bardo Tujol, liberation upon seeing, which is the title of this text and this type of teaching. So in short, we should practice as best we can. Essentially, the practices of the great perfection, Trekchö and Tögal, but also we should apply ourselves to prayer and supplication, chanting the Vajraguru mantra or the mantra of whichever deity you feel connected with. The Chinese have a very strong connection with Amitabha, so you could pray and chant Buddha Amitabha's mantra with faith and devotion. And then when you reach the point of death, well, transferring your consciousness to the praying to the deities, transferring your consciousness to the deity. Like I said, that is one method. And indeed, the deities will appear in person before you. They will manifest vividly at the point of death, right before you. So the point is that if we practice well now, then we will be able to practice well later in the bardo of dying and so on. So last few points before we finish for today. The text reads, As I am about to leave this compound body of flesh and blood. So, well, first of all, let's just reiterate by saying the point is that we need to sustain Rigpa. We need to train and familiarize ourselves with with the nature of mind, so that we're able to sustain the recognition of Rigpa, so that we're able to rest in or let be in Rigpa, in the natural state. This is the best method for liberation. Uh, there's no greater method, no more efficacious or profound method than this. And this is the practice of the great perfection for liberation in the bardo of dying. As I'm about to leave this compound body of flesh and blood, so what does this mean? Well, now that the outer, inner, and secret dissolution stages have occurred, I'm about to leave this compound body, this corporeal body of flesh and blood. The subtlest aspect of our body are the white and red essences attained from our father and mother, right? We can say those essences are the subtlest level, subtlest aspect of our physical body. And when the secret dissolution stages occur, then just as described, the red essence, the white essence, and red essence, they descend and ascend. So we have this experience of intense whiteness, redness, and then we arrive in complete blankness or darkness. And these correspond to, or these are described as the three stages of appearance, attainment, and appearance, increase, and attainment. So when the white essence attained from the Father descends from our crown that experience is called appearance. Then when the red essence attained from the Mother ascends from below our navel, that is called increase. And then when the two meet in the heart, and all afflictions, all concepts come to a halt, and we enter a complete state void of all afflictions and concepts. That is called the experience of attainment. After that, we arrive in we reach a state that is clear and open, just like a completely clear, pure, limpid sky. And this is called close attainment or complete attainment. So we go through these experiences during the secret dissolution stages, and then we become completely free. At that point, we are then completely free. We have completely left this compound body of flesh and blood, even in the most subtle, at the most subtle level. And as I said, at this point, then Rigpa, natural awareness, is laid bare, becomes perfectly and clearly manifest. And if we are someone who has gained experience through practice, through applying themselves, then at this point they will recognize and be liberated. If one has not practiced and gained experience, then one will not recognize or register what is happening here, and in a split second, the experience will pass. So in short, as I'm about to leave this compound body of flesh and blood that is a veil and an obscuration, as we saw with the story of Motsawa, then we have the opportunity to recognize Rigpa. At this point, I will know it to be a transitory illusion. So we have let's just to mention the two bardos of practice, namely the bardos of meditation and dream. If we have practiced in those bardos, in short, if we have applied ourselves to practice and gained familiarity, then we will be able to recognize during death, during the bardo of dying, that whatever appears is just a transitory illusion. Ideally, we will be able to sustain the recognition of Rigpa at this point and be liberated in the natural state through the recognition of Rigpa. But another approach, if we're not able to do that, to maintain that recognition, is to recognize that whatever appears, it is all a transitory illusion. Everything is just like a dream, just like an illusion. If we familiarize ourselves with this, if we really come to understand this, then we will not become confused no matter what appears. We will not fall into the trap of confusion. As a result, we won't accumulate karma, we will not feel the afflictions, and as a result, we will not be reborn again in samsara. So there are these two approaches. Ideally, we sustain the recognition of Rigpa and through that are liberated, but failing that, we can familiarize ourselves with the truth that whatever appears, it is just an illusion, it is just a dream, and that will prevent us from falling into further confusion. That will safeguard us. There's an instruction called the instruction of a young woman looking in a mirror, which, okay, so it plays on the analogy of a young woman who's getting dressed up for a party. So she puts on her clothes, she gets dressed very carefully, puts on all her jewelry, she does her makeup, her hair, and so on. Now she's ready to go out, but before she goes out, she takes just one more look in the mirror, right, to check. So that's the, yeah, analogous to that, the instruction of a young woman looking in a mirror is to check and recognize in this way. And this instruction, so the instruction of a young woman looking in a mirror relates to the practice of poa, the transference of consciousness, which is one of the most swift and efficacious methods for for gaining liberation in the bardo of dying. So this is to say we really need to train in poa. You can train in poa for just 6 or 7 days. That's all it takes to receive the signs, to achieve the signs of successful poa, and that will be of enormous assistance to you at the time of death. Um, Yeah, that will be of enormous assistance to you at the time of death. You'll be able to liberate yourself in the bardo of dying as a result. So now let's dedicate the merit. Sorry, just one last thing. So as I mentioned, there are different types of poa, and if we apply, all of them can lead to liberation in the bardo of dying. So if we apply the Dhammakaya poa of sustaining recognition of Rigpa through the practice of the Great Perfection, well then, yeah, in that way we'll attain liberation through the Dhammakaya poa. Sambhogakaya poa is the practice of the generation stage, and Dhammakaya poa is the poa that we've just been talking about, the dissolution of the white and red essences in the central channel and so on.
Namde damje zikba nye damne nye be danam bamje jen gega na je balon du chibin zalen do do